We're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning, Angie Zelter. Angie Zelter is a British peace activist. She is founder of a number of international campaign groups, including Trident Ploughshares, which was a recipient of the Right Livelihood Award, also known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize. She is also co-founder of the International Women's Peace Service. In the 1980s, she founded the Snowball campaign, which encouraged several thousand people to cut the fences around U.S. military bases in the UK. In 96, she was part of a group that disarmed a Hawk jet, ZH-955, causing 1.5 million pounds of damage and preventing it from being exported to Indonesia, where it would have been used to attack East Timor. She is also author of several books, Fastlane 365, A Year of Anti-Nuclear Blockades, and Trident on Trial, The Case for People's Disarmament. So start out and give some background on yourself. How did you get becoming involved as an activist?
Well, I was at university, and the last year at university I read Blueprint for Survival, which was the first issue of a magazine called The Ecologist. And in it talked about all sorts of things that I'd never come across, like acid rain and global warming and nuclear weapons and all sorts of things. And I thought, how could I have done a whole university degree and not come across all of these vital issues? And then after my degree, when I finished, I went to Africa with my husband, to Cameroon, and we were working in community development. And I realized that racism still existed. And that we had a class system. In other words, I came from a very apolitical background, and I suddenly realized that there were a lot of big issues out there. After 3 years in Cameroon, well, let me say, when I was in Cameroon, after I'd been there a year, a guy said to me, a Cameroonian guy, he said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to come and help third world countries." And he said, "Help? What do you mean help?" He said, "If you want to help us, go back to Britain and deal with why we're poor here. Basically, your countries are ripping us off. You're exploiting all our resources." And I said, "You're dead right. You're absolutely right." So after the 3 years, we had an option of renewing our contract. And I said to my husband, I think we should go back, because that's where the root of a lot of the issues and the problems in the world are coming from. They're coming from our colonialist country. So when I got back, it was in the late 70s, early 80s. And of course, at that time, the main issue was nuclear weapons. So I got involved in demonstrating and collecting signatures for a world disarmament petition, and got involved that way. And it's not stopped really since, because Britain's still involved in exploitation and wars, and still has a huge carbon footprint, and is still, as far as I can see, ripping off the world because of the financial structures.
Yeah, it's looking like you still got your work cut out for you for the foreseeable future.
I don't think it's going to end, probably. A lot of these issues have been going on for a long time, and they need more and more of us to be tackling them.
So did the Snowball campaign come before Trident Ploughshares?
Yes, that was part of the 80s. That was when we were the US aircraft carrier for Europe. It was during the Cold War, and many of us realized that actually Britain had a huge number of US bases with nuclear weapons as well. And Greenham Common, I expect most people have heard of Greenham Common. The missiles were coming over, and they were in Europe as well. I went to Greenham Common. I think that was probably one of my first arrests, actually, the women's peace movement there, which was trying to stop the US missiles being based there, the cruise missiles. That radicalized me and made me realize that ordinary women could stand up against this mostly masculine military industrial complex. And also there were thousands of women going into the local courts there, and they were doing their court cases in very many different ways. And I realized that there wasn't one way to protest or one way to try to get rid of these things. Each person had to find their own voice and could do it in their own way. And there was a message at Greenham which said, "Carry Greenham home." Now, at that time I had a young family. I had 2 young children. We lived in an extended family in Norfolk, and it was quite a long way from the Greenham base, so I decided to take that message, "Carry Greenham home." And we had quite a few US bases in East Anglia, and so I started the Snowball Civil Disobedience campaign in my local area. And what it was basically encouraging people to just find 2 other people to take part as well, to write letters to the government asking them to take one small step towards disarmament, and that they would commit themselves to just cutting one strand of fence around a US base. Now that sounds incredibly symbolic, but it was criminal damage, and therefore people were going into court to explain why they had cut one strand of fence. So what we were doing was very little, and what we were asking the government to do was also quite little. It was just saying, just take one step towards nuclear disarmament. There's many things that you could do, just one step. And I think several thousand people were arrested during that campaign, and there were a lot of discussions about, vandalism and, why should people be committing criminal damage, and, was it right? Was that a violent act or was it not a violent act? Loads of public discussion about that, and I think that that was a very useful campaign because it made people realise that criminal damage and vandalism is more about the intent and what the consequences of that is and what you're doing it for. It isn't just about whether you're damaging something or not. Because, for instance, if you're rebuilding your house or your garage, you might knock it down and then rebuild something. You don't call the knocking down vandalism or criminal damage, do you? You call that part of a creative process of rebuilding. And what we were saying was that we were cutting down the fences because we wanted to transform them. We wanted these bases to go away, and we wanted to have something that was more sustainable and more humane. We didn't want these nuclear weapons there.
And it sounds like that, in fact, by actually physically doing something, taking that step, that helped your court cases, as opposed to if they hadn't done anything,
Well, in those days, in the 80s, we were not winning those cases. They were basically rather symbolic because, and what we were being told in the court is, you're just doing this for public attention. You're not doing anything. You're just wanting to get into the news or something. And we were saying, no, sorry, what we're trying to do here is to sort of bring things into the light. We're trying to show people that these weapons of mass destruction are here. And it was in the process of that I started learning about international law and realizing that actually it wasn't just a moral and ethical and humane action. It wasn't, we weren't only doing these for moral reasons, but actually that the law was on our side as well. And that morality, I started thinking about the law and morality. And of course, the whole purpose of the law really is to protect the innocent and the weak and to protect society so that we don't all have to go around carrying guns. I know I'm in a gun culture here, but remember, I come from Europe. We don't have a gun culture there. We're not allowed guns, thank God, on our streets. You can only have a gun with a license for a very specific purpose. And the reason we don't have guns, because obviously in the past some people did, was that we rely on the law to protect us. So if something's going wrong, you go through the courts or you go to your police and they sort it out. So everybody doesn't have to go around doing that. Kind of getting lost now, really, but I think I was just trying to say that the morality in the law is very strong, and if the law isn't linked to morality, then it loses in a way its legitimacy. And when we discovered that the international law was on our side, and actually there already were laws on an international level to prevent us all having weapons, and that then we had something that we could argue in court as well, and that led on to other campaigns. But at the snowball stage in the 80s, it was just simply a civil disobedience campaign, and we were just beginning to learn more about international law in those days.
And it sounds like it had some success because eventually it sounds like most of the U.S. bases are now out of the UK?
Well, interesting. I mean, Greenham Common was the big success story, I think, because thousands and thousands of women went there over quite a few years. And the protests weren't just in Britain, but they were across the whole of Europe. We did manage to get rid of the Pershing missiles in Germany, from eastern Germany, and also from the cruise missiles from Britain. So Greenham Common, that one. The getting rid of the US nuclear weapons has taken much longer, and it's only been in the last couple of years that we've realised that we have succeeded there. And from the documents that we've seen on the internet, because you get a lot more freedom of information in the US than we do in the UK, which is quite a secretive society. It seems that it was because there were so many protests at Lakenheath, which is near where I was living, and the US military just couldn't stop the number of protesters getting into the high security nuclear weapons depots in Lakenheath, that they've now withdrawn nuclear weapons from Lakenheath. So we don't any longer have US nuclear weapons in Britain, which is great. But of course we do still have UK nuclear weapons, and they're all based in Scotland. And that's what I've been concentrating on for the last sort of 6 or 7 years. Well, actually no, in Scotland for the last 12 years with Trident Ploughshares.
Can you briefly talk about the Hawk jet that you were involved with?
Okay, yeah, that was 1996. That was my first Ploughshares action. And if we put it in context, that was in the context of a huge British arms trade, which we still have, which is basically selling weapons wherever it can and to repressive regimes. So while it's talking about democracy and support for people, it's actually encouraging an arms trade. And there's no real controls on that arms trade. So although they pretend that they wouldn't sell them to, repressive regimes, they do sell them. And at that time, they were selling them to Suharto, who'd already killed millions of Indonesians, and who'd occupied East Timor and had killed 200,000 people, a third of the population of East Timor. And these Hawk jets were produced by British Aerospace, which is one of our major arms industries. And we had evidence through a film done by John Pilger that you might have heard of, that they had been decimating tribes and actually committing genocide. Whole tribes, distinct, unique tribes of people in East Timor had been wiped out by the use of these Hawk jets. There had been a large campaign against, there is a great organisation in Britain called the Campaign Against the Arms Trade. They've been doing a lot on trying to stop the arms trade. But a small group of us got together and decided that if we couldn't do it by letter writing and demonstrations then, which we would continue to try to do, then if this particular batch in 1996, 1995-96, were going to be exported, we would try to prevent that export by damaging as many of them as we could. So a group of 10 women prepared for a year. We went to see British Aerospace, we lobbied our parliament, we wrote letters, we did everything that we could do as an ordinary citizen to try to prevent the arms trade, along with other, hundreds of thousands of people in Britain writing letters. And then just before this particular Hawk jet was due to be exported, 4 of our group of 10 became open disarmers. 3 of them went in. I remained on the outside to do the publicity and then do a second run if the first run hadn't run. And we were the 4 open disarmers. We'd already done a film to indict the government and put all the evidence together. We wrote a booklet about it because we knew that we faced maybe 10 years in prison, and we wanted to make sure that the information got to the jury because we were going to stand by our action, and we wanted to explain it adequately. £1.5 million worth of damage was done to the Hawk jet at the British Aerospace factory at Warton. And 4 of us were picked up and kept in prison for 6 months in high security prison. And then we got to court and we were able to explain to the jury what had happened. It was touch and go because the particular judge, I was slightly separate from the others because I'd been picked up later on. And I had a hidden court case, and I was representing myself, so there were no lawyers on my side. I got to this first hearing, and the judge said to me, "Women like you should be locked up for a very long time." And I was quite shocked that a judge would say that to me. I said, what are you saying? I hope you're not going to be the judge that's going to represent us, because I consider that a very biased remark. And he said, "Yes, I will be your judge." I was absolutely shocked. So he showed his true colours. In a way, the fact that he was such a revoltingly biased judge showed through, and the jury could see that too, because one of our witnesses in that case was José Ramos Horta, who later got the Nobel Peace Prize. He was in exile, an East Timorese in exile, and we managed to get him to our court case. And when he came in to explain what those Hawk jets had been done to the jury, the judge was absolutely disgusting with him. And when he was he'd been asked a question about what damage had these Hawk jets done, as if they'd done none, and he was trying to explain. And the judge just said, answering yes or no. He just didn't want this information to come out. And he was kind of humiliated, publicly humiliated, or the judge tried to humiliate him and tried to make him out to be a liar, and he went. Because I wasn't represented, I could do what I like in the trial to some extent. So I just stood up and I apologised as he went out, and I said, I apologise for the behaviour of that judge, because I know and I feel for what those East Timorese, you as East Timor, have suffered. And I think those sort of things that kept on coming in the trial influenced the jury, and the fact that they had the video and they had the booklet, because they'd been on all of us when we'd all been arrested and were left by the damaged plane. And so although the judge said that to the jury that we obviously didn't have a defence and we should be found guilty, the jury found us not guilty. And that was an amazing feeling of success. And of course, Jose Ramos Horta and Bishop Bello, the East Timorese, went on to get the Peace Prize, and East Timor did become independent. One of the nicest things about that was while we were in prison waiting, we had a smuggled letter from an East Timorese that came out of an Indonesian jail that said, we've heard about it even though we're inside an Indonesian jail, and we thank you for downing a plane without any loss of life.
All right, so talk about Trident Ploughshares and the Trident system in the UK. Is it... I assume the Trident subs are similar to the ones here in the U.S.?
They're very similar, yes. And the Trident missiles that we use are actually leased from the U.S. And in fact, in Britain, we actually say, look, we haven't got an independent deterrent. What's all this about? It's actually based on, on the American system. And so we lease our missiles from the US, and there's obviously a huge interchange, and you'll find thousands of US scientists working at Aldermaston on the replacement for the Trident missiles at our Aldermaston, which is our bomb-making factory, which is against the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Any renewal of any nuclear weapons is against the Non-Proliferation Treaty, because we promised when we signed that treaty that we would involve ourselves in nuclear disarmament. That was our deal. For no other countries getting nuclear weapons, we would all disarm, which we haven't done. So we're breaking the law there. So there's a big connection between the US and the UK system. All of our nuclear weapons now are based on these Trident submarines, and they're based in Scotland. And the majority of the Scottish public, 85%, are against nuclear weapons and want the nuclear weapons out of Scotland. And we now have a Scottish National Party in power that would like to get rid of those nuclear weapons. But the Westminster is saying that's a devolved power, that is something that only the UK government can decide, and they're ignoring the whole, the Scottish context, if you like. Trident Ploughshares started 12 years ago, quite small. We didn't know what we would face because we thought we might, it would be difficult to get people to do disarmament actions. We might face 10 years or so in prison. But we decided that we would get as many people signed up to personally try to disarm in a non-violent manner the nuclear weapons system. We wrote a handbook. We took a year to do that. We made our names public. We sent them to the government, and we said, if you do not engage in nuclear disarmament within a certain time limit, then we will start publicly and non-violently disarming the nuclear system. And in our handbook, we had lots of stuff on non-violence and the Ploughshares movement and Trident, the Trident system, but also a map of or a diagram of the Trident submarine, and where it would be safe to disarm it and how to disarm it and how not to disarm it. In other words, don't go near the nuclear reactors, don't cut electrical wires that go here, to make sure that we would do it in a way that wouldn't harm anybody. That was actually leaked to the press just before the time limit was up and we started. So I actually got a call from the commander at Faslane Base asking for one of these handbooks. So I charged him £10 for it. So that was quite interesting. And we started with several hundred people and started cutting through fences and swimming across lochs and trying to get near the submarines. And it's gone on from there, and several thousand people have been arrested, and quite a few serious disarmament actions have taken place. And quite a few victories have been won in the court as well.
You appear to get a lot more people participating in your Ploughshares work there in the UK and Scotland than we do here in the US. How do you account for that?
I don't know whether it's more or less, but I think it's more secular, the movement. When Trident Ploughshares started, we knew that the Ploughshares movement in the USA was mostly Christian based, and we decided that we would make it for anybody of faith or of no faith, secular or whatever, because basically all religions and all people, if they're really human, share a basic ethical framework, which you don't harm people. You know that murder is wrong. You know, you don't steal. Well, the basic ethical foundation, I think, of all societies is very similar. So we wanted to base it on that, and we also wanted to base it very firmly on international law and delegitimize nuclear weapons, because basically they're terror weapons, they're weapons of mass destruction, and they completely dehumanize us and destroy the integrity of our societies and the moral framework for our societies. Because if you're willing to threaten mass murder, then what can you say about an ordinary murderer in the street, you know? And the only thing that distinguishes a soldier from a murderer is that he is given permission by society to do legalized killing. And the killing has to be done in a certain way and under a certain legal framework, and that is international humanitarian law, which says that you don't target, for instance, women and children or hospitals or cultural artifacts. You don't, destroy the environment forever. That the killing of your soldiers must be done within that framework. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're just letting loose, sort of non-ending violence, which is where I think we've got to today, because the USA and the UK and the major nuclear powers, the powerful nations, are not obeying those international laws. We're seeing more and more wars and more civilians getting killed all the time. I mean, just look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. You know, the quantity of civilian infrastructure damage and the number of millions of ordinary men, women and children that have been killed there is outrageous. That isn't war according to international law, where soldier is meant to fight soldier. It's just completely gone beyond that. So Trident Ploughshares is basing itself on international law and encouraging people to be involved in non-violent direct action to disarm nuclear weapons themselves, because our governments and police and courts are not doing it for us. And the reason why probably we can get more people doing that is that the implications in the court are less than here. In Britain, we do have a jury system, and we are allowed generally to give a full defence. So we have, I think, a fairer legal system here than you do here. I've heard, for instance, that the Tacoma people, the people that are up in Tacoma Court on Tuesday next week, are being disallowed their defence, are not going to be allowed expert witnesses, and that the prosecution, I don't know what you call them here, but anyway, the prosecution are trying to prevent them from even talking about the lethality of nuclear weapons, which is core to their argument. Because, I mean, obviously, the whole reason that they went in there was because these nuclear weapons threaten, the peace of the whole world. They threaten actually all life on Earth, because there's more than 20,000 nuclear weapons, within, 20 miles of Seattle? I think it's a large...
It's 20 miles away.
Yeah.
It's the largest repository of nuclear weapons in the Western Hemisphere,
more than
if not the world.
2,000 nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Is it 2,300 or something, nuclear weapons, something like that? It's
We're not positive.
I
It's
think
definitely over 2,000.
I think it's the largest conglomeration of nuclear weapons anywhere in the whole world.
Yeah. If that county became its own country, it would be the world's largest nuclear weapons.
And they're not allowed to talk about that, and yet that is key to their defence. In Britain, we are allowed to talk to it, which means that the jury gets gets the truth and the whole truth, which is what we pledged to do in court, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We're allowed to do that to a larger extent than you are, and therefore we tend to get fines or acquittals or very small imprisonments, whereas here, you're very. The American citizens have been very brave to do what they do because some of them have been in prison for years, for what we would maybe only get, £100 fine for or something.
How is the media in the UK? Do they cover your events? Do they cover it with any sense of balance?
In Scotland, they've been covering it. In England, no. And they tend to go for the personal story or the kind of, I don't know, they don't discuss the issues. I mean, I worry about the way that the media don't allow the real issues to be explained and talked about, which then just trivializes the whole discussion. Alternative media are much better, and now that there is the internet, people can get the information if they really want to.
And how has you've been doing this for quite a while now, has the climate changed in both public opinion and media since you first began doing this?
Yes. I mean, our Hawkjet action was the first Ploughshares action where we ever got an acquittal, where we were found not guilty. And since then, there have been actions in Scotland and in Ireland and in England, and we've won. You know, there was a recent action, disarmament action against the export of weapons to Israel during the last Gaza incursion, which killed so many people there. And they were allowed to give their defence and explain what Israel had been doing, and they won their case. I think the general public, when juries are given the information, we're getting a lot more acquittals. I think the public opinion is now turning against this whole war machine. I think people are realising that we've been doing this for thousands of years. It's getting us absolutely nowhere. Violence just causes violence. We have to deal with the root causes. And one of the root causes is the financial structures. We have to take back the power from the banks. We have to governments need to create money on credit. We have to take away the power of the corporations, make corporations responsible and liable for what they do. And then that will maybe take away the money imperative, the money kind of, which is driving this whole military-industrial complex. And the other thing that people mustn't forget is that the US military, for instance, actually uses more than 50% of the carbon resources of the world. It is the major contributor to climate change, and that is kept out of the equations. It's not talked about at Cancun and anything because of various international agreements in the past. We have to stop the military.
So with that, we're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Thank you.